Alright, finally got some more boxes installed and got the front shocks showed up and installed. Front shocks were quite an ordeal. They had to be pretty custom to fit the Kelderman system due to the width of the brackets. But here I took everything apart for the boxes, got the mounts done. There was a little bit of rust under there because I never really took care of it when I first mounted the spare tire carrier. So these are the mounts of the boxes. I used heavy duty nut certs so I can remove the boxes fairly easily. You see them there in the mounts. It's like 7 nut certs per box, mounted them laterally and vertically, so it should hold the load fine. Removing the boxes easily is pretty important so I can get to all the suspension components and anything if I ever need to do maintenance. A lot of people hard mount their boxes and they'll never be able to get underneath the vehicle. I didn't want to be up in that mess. So those 2 rear bolts were not nut certs. So it's just a through hole in a tab I made, and it was a royal pain in the ass to get under there to hold it. And that you can see I did into the extrusion with another nut cert so it holds it in all directions. This one can basically fit a normal size human. Here's the double compartment one mounted. I did double on this side because this is where I usually spend most of the time when I'm actually camping, so I can separate all the stuff. The other side I did one giant one because that's going to be the large bulky items. The tools will be in the long vertical one because that whole thing's supported by the subframe and all the weight. Miscellaneous stuff will be in that one that I need easy access to while camping. The lines and everything came out absolutely perfect in my opinion. Highway Products just absolutely rocks. One thing I knew going in is the other side I was going to have to notch for the fuel filler. This is another thank you, Jared, for helping me fix the aluminum. I cannot weld aluminum, and it was pretty horrible cutting into a brand new $2,000 box before I even mounted it to the truck to do this, but it needed to be done. I did all the planning with the CAD, cardboard aided design, cut out the aluminum, and Jared used his wizard skills and welded it all together perfectly to notch the for the fuel filler. And that's just some Flex Seal I had lying around, but I didn't really need it because his welds are friggin' perfect. Here's the front shocks. Apparently there's a little miscommunication. The rear ones are delayed 3 to 4 weeks. These were quite an ordeal to design. They look like standard shocks, but they're needed a lot of little different tidbits here and there to get them to fit with the Kelderman setup. That cap there where it says EDS had to be a different size than the usual ones because it wouldn't fit in between the brackets. I'll show you more on that later. I believe that cap is off of their Ford Raptor race shocks or something. It has an application. Don't exactly recall what it is. But took a bunch of measurements so I could get the adjustable reservoir exactly where I needed without kinking or routing the hose too crazy. And so far I can find. It's got about 20 clicks of compression adjustment, which for the airbags is going to be key. They did the shocks on my Tundra, and I was over the moon happy with them. And while planning all this out, probably sent back a couple dozen emails to Tyler. He's their design geek over there, and he walked me through the process of exactly what measurements they needed. Mounting the reservoirs is a bit harder than it looks if you're not mounting them directly to the shocks, which most people do. I couldn't, one, because there's no room, and two, I don't want the reservoirs down that low and be climbing under my truck to adjust them. So these little things I found are roll bar off-road light mounts, because the reservoirs are also 2.5 inches. So finding something that diameter that will work as I needed was a lot harder than one would think. But these showed up. They're off of Amazon. I don't even know the brand. Probably made in China by a 6-year-old. But they have rubber inlays in them, so there's no scarring or any scratching. Not that I really care, but pretty impressive. I think they're like $14 a pair, and they're going to work out exactly how I need them to. The hose is a bit thicker and a bit stiffer than I thought, so luckily I got pretty lucky with all the measurements I did, and I was able to make it work, but it's a little bit different than I had planned. I had to make up these brackets, not these. The quality of the stuff's amazing. Not my brackets, they're cheesy. But I needed to cut this out of some scrap I had laying around. The notch up there goes around the bracket for the Kelderman. Reason it's tricky is there's only 3 studs holding that on, and they're welded to the shock tower, and they're not all that long. You need a thin piece of metal. I had this laying around, so I threw it together just to test it and make sure it works. It's eventually going to get redone. I have to make it stouter. It's safe right now. It's just a little bit flimsier than I'd care for. But there it is, all mounted up. You see the reservoir is nice and high. Compressed everything. Plenty of clearance with the shock and the tire. The tire will never hit it, even though it looks fairly close. Yeah, this is actually with air taken out of the bag, so it's not even full right now. This was the tricky part right here. You see the shock and the bracket. There has to be enough room for that shock to move around a little bit. And yeah, that was tricky. The bottom, straightforward, easy. Looks like not much travel, but the bags themselves don't have that much travel, and I already tested it, and it's about 1 inch from ever bottoming out regardless. If I bottomed it out, the tire took off the whole fender and basically destroyed the front end of the truck, so shock would be the least of my problems. The rear, which is still on order, is even a little bit. You see the notch in the frame there. That stock shock, that little casing right there, is 2.5 inch diameter. So 3 inch wouldn't even have fit in the back because of the way the frame is, and I did not want to notch the frame. So the rear shocks are going to have a bottom exit hose, and I'm going to be mounting the reservoir right here, right on top of the Kelderman bracket. Hose is going to come up through here, mount right to the bracket, turn the knob right there. Easy peasy adjustment. I don't want to be crawling under my truck to adjust my suspension. Yeah, you see the notch right there in the frame and the clearance. Couldn't get a bigger shock in there if I wanted to without clearance in the frame, which I'm not going to do. I'll reroute that park and brake cable too when I replace the shock. And that's about it. Hopefully the rear shocks get here soon and I get this thing all dialed up and everything will be good to go. Thank you for watching.